working in the sector for about a decade across the energy system in various countries. And so taking some of the key aspects which both Neil and Rust have just alluded to, going a bit broader than just ESG and looking at regulatory reporting and sustainability compliance in general, we're going to first zoom out for a bit to look at some of the key macro drivers which are driving these ground level trends which the other chaps are talking about. And then we will zoom back in to see how they're weaving into the utilities landscape. So yes, starting off with on screen ESG, acronym Environment, Social and Governance. It's one of a few three-letter acronyms we'll be using today and probably a few four-letter ones as well. And though ESG is not a fully globally defined, it's not defined, it is having a top-down effect on many of the ground level trends. Now, I think many of you will have at least heard of it and so have some awareness of it. But what you may not know, and maybe an interesting insight, is how closely tied to and how closely it maps to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. In essence, the ESG practices, in whatever form, are mechanisms to achieve many of the absolute top-level UN SDGs. So this is, as we can see, it's starting right top level and how we're starting to go layer by layer down, right? And the related reporting and compliance is now having an increasingly significant impact on companies. And that's not just in terms of the paperwork, that's having quite an influence on the amount of investment and the financing that they're receiving as well. So we're moving to a time where regulatory compliance and then financial compliance are starting to overlap a bit. So for today, we're only going to focus on the E portion for environment, but for our purposes, it's overlapping with sustainability. And of course, it is the most relevant to the utilities and the energy space, particularly in terms of reducing carbon emissions. So if we now start to zoom down a bit and look at how utilities and energy companies are being practically affected in terms of broad compliance, a major example is the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is, there you go, a four-letter acronym, and there's one more, which as of this year, 2024, has replaced the preceding NFRD, the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, which was a voluntary framework. So that's the key switch. Now we're going from voluntary to mandatory. And what CSRD is doing, as we start going down those layers, is transforming the aspirational principles and goals of ESG into specific legally binding regulations which have their own set of related performance metrics and indicators. All right. So ultimately, CSRD is trying to elevate sustainability reporting to the rigor of financial reporting. So there's a massive leap in the complexity that's going to be involved in that. And of course, it's impacting all sorts of companies with new detailed disclosure and audit requirements. So a major knock-on effect of that is that it's driving digitization, general digital transformation, and has also been alluded to AI transformation in order to just manage that sheer volume of data and complexity. And that is encompassing everything from simple automation all the way through to clever AI and some of the clever AI that we will talk about in a little bit. All right, so when you start talking about digitization and digital transformation, you start to get some imperatives which have to come into place, particularly again around the nature of data collection, since companies of, again, many sizes are having to grapple with both the compliance frameworks and also the fragmented data sources that they're having to pull from. So from a purely manual effort, that would be quite debilitating for many companies because it requires, or historically has required, dedicated teams in the larger companies which have been historically affected. as smaller and smaller companies become encompassed within the mandates, it's a heavy burden and they just don't have the manpower for it. So it's driving the need for, instead of taking on more manual resources, to find clever software solutions, automation solutions, and of course, AI solutions. So this is everything from automating the data collection and validating it all the way through to enabling individual ownership and personalized dashboards and personalized intelligence and things like this. And it's also about future proofing through agile software approaches so that it can adapt to the evolving requirements and prescriptive regulatory landscape. So then we can now look at that back down to the specific landscape of digitization within what's happening in the energy and the utility space. And we can see that new AI-driven tools are coming in. They're helping with consolidating data, verifying the accuracy, helping to self-complete the compliance frameworks. And aside from CSRD, there are others of similar complexity which are also starting to become mandatory. AI is particularly applicable here because taking, for example, just emissions accounting, you've got something like 120,000 emissions factors across 195 countries. It's not to say every country has that many, but you can say that's just one specific area of sustainability, and it's complex all of itself. So AI can enable organizations to perform the rapid and reliable calculations whilst also maintaining the fulfillment in a transparent way. So all of these things are becoming very important as the regulations tighten. Right. So, of course, the 80-20 rule of automation assistance aiding human oversight will remain true. I don't think that's going to change anytime in the future because given the complexity, you're still going to need that human expertise to make sure that the AI is providing what you need, but it's about really easing the process, accelerating it, and increasing the accuracy. So from that list of some quite obvious ones, probably the most interesting and exciting for next year will be interactive Q&A, which by any other name would be chatbots and AI agents. So on that note, I shall now hand over to eventually Johan, who will take a deeper dive into AI agents and what's happening in the space.